Have you ever felt like someone was trying to take away something that truly belonged to you? Imagine saving for years, finally owning your dream piece of land. A quiet lakefront lot, the kind of place you could escape to when life feels too loud. But then, out of nowhere, the very people who were supposed to protect your neighborhood tried to take it from you. That's exactly what happened to me. And trust me, this story doesn't end the way they expected. Let me take you back to the beginning. I had been searching for a piece of land for years, and when I found this lakefront lot, I knew it was the one. The water sparkled every morning, the air was fresher, and the silence was so peaceful it almost felt unreal. I told myself, this is where I'll build my future home, a place my family can enjoy for generations. I bought it fair and square, paid the fees, signed the papers, followed every rule, or so I thought. That's when the HOA, the Homeowners Association, came into the picture. Now, if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you know they can be strict. Rules about the height of your fence, the color of your front door, even what kind of mailbox you can have. But in this case, they weren't just strict, they were greedy. One day, I received a letter in the mail. I thought it was the usual, maybe a notice about lawn care or a reminder about dues. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. The letter claimed that my lakefront lot wasn't actually mine anymore. According to them, the HOA had the right to sell it. And get this, they had already listed it for sale without even telling me first. I sat there in shock, reading and rereading the letter. How could they possibly sell something I legally owned? How could they think I wouldn't notice? My first reaction was anger, but right behind that was confusion. Was this even legal? Was I about to lose my dream property to some shady HOA tactic? I decided to dig deeper. I pulled out all the original paperwork from when I purchased the lot. I double-checked every signature, every date, every page. Everything was in order. There was no way they could just erase my ownership like that. But the HOA didn't care. When I confronted them at their office, they acted like I was the problem. One board member smirked at me and said, well, technically, the HOA has rights over community land. And since you haven't developed your lot yet, it falls into a gray area. A gray area? Are you kidding me? That was their excuse for stealing someone's property? The more they talked, the clearer it became. This wasn't about rules. This was about power. They thought I would just roll over, get scared, and let them take what I had worked so hard for. But they didn't know me. Instead of backing down, I started asking questions. I asked for proof, for legal documents, for any record that gave them the right to sell my lot. They couldn't give me a single thing. All they did was dance around the issue, try to intimidate me with official-sounding language. But here's the thing. Intimidation only works if you're willing to be intimidated. I left that office furious, but also determined. I knew they had crossed a line. I knew I had to fight back, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might fall victim to their schemes. If they could try this with me, how many other neighbors had they bullied before? How many people had lost what was theirs because they were too afraid to speak up? That night, I barely slept. I kept pacing the floor, going over every possible move in my head. I thought about hiring a lawyer. I thought about taking the HOA to court. But then another idea crept into my mind, an idea that seemed almost too wild to be true. What if, instead of fighting them on their turf, I turned the game around? The next morning, I started researching everything about the HOA, their board members, their rules, their financial reports. Yes, those are public if you know where to look. And that's when I discovered something shocking. The HOA was drowning in debt. Years of mismanagement, bad decisions, and overspending had left them broke. They were barely keeping the lights on in their own office. In fact, the very building where they had laughed in my face just a day before was close to foreclosure. That was the moment everything clicked. They were trying to sell my lot because they were desperate for money. They thought they could use me as an easy target, cash in on my land, and keep their sinking ship afloat. But what they didn't realize was that their own ship was already going down, and I had the chance to do something about it. Instead of just fighting to keep my lot, I started thinking bigger. What if I bought them out? What if I took control of the very HOA that was trying to steal from me? The thought sent a rush of adrenaline through me. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew they would fight back. But I also knew something they didn't. I had leverage. They needed money. I had money. And if I played my cards right, I could turn this entire situation upside down. So, while they were busy trying to sell my lakefront lot, I was busy making phone calls, setting up meetings, and talking to the right people. I started learning about how HOA boards actually work, how their offices can be bought, and how their debts can force them into desperate deals. Every step I took, I felt more confident. The power was shifting. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the one being hunted. I was the one setting the trap. But let me tell you, power games like this aren't clean. They get messy fast. And before long, things started heating up in ways I never could have imagined. Because when the HOA realized I wasn't just going to give up my lot, when they figured out I was planning something bigger, they came after me harder than ever. Phone calls, threats, nasty letters. It felt like they were trying to scare me into silence. But if there's one thing you should know about me, it's this. The more someone pushes me, the stronger I push back. And that's exactly what I did. By the time I was finished, the people who tried to take my land had no idea what was about to hit them. And that's where things take a wild turn. Because instead of losing my lot, I ended up owning something much bigger. Something that gave me the last laugh. But I'll get to that in the next part. For now, just remember this. Never underestimate someone who has nothing to lose and everything to fight for. When I left you in the last part of this story, the HOA thought they had me cornered. They thought I was just one person fighting against their entire system. But what they didn't realize was that I wasn't fighting alone. I had something even stronger on my side. The truth, the law, and a plan that would flip their entire scheme upside down. The more I dug into their finances, the more shocking it became. Their office, the same building where they sat across from me, smirking and telling me my lot was theirs, was falling apart, not just physically but financially. They were behind on mortgage payments. They had unpaid bills stacked to the ceiling. They were in a hole so deep that they were scrambling for money in every direction. And suddenly it all made sense. That was why they tried to sell my lot. Not because they had a legal right, but because they were desperate. They needed a way out, and they thought I was too small to fight back. But they made a mistake. They underestimated me. I started looking at their office building in a whole new way. To them, it was their power center, the place where they made decisions and controlled the community. But to me, it became a symbol. If I could take that office away from them, it wouldn't just be a financial win. It would be poetic justice. The very walls they used to intimidate people would belong to the person they tried to destroy. So I got to work. I reached out to the bank that held their mortgage. After some persistence, I found the right person to talk to, and I explained that I was interested in buying the building if the HOA defaulted. At first, the banker was hesitant, but once I showed that I was serious, doors began to open. I learned exactly how much they owed, how far behind they were, and what it would take to take control. Meanwhile, the HOA kept trying to pressure me. They sent letters demanding I give up my lot to resolve the situation. They even hinted at legal action, though they never had a single piece of proof that supported their claim. Every letter, every threat, only made me more determined. I kept all of it, every word, every signature, because I knew one day those papers might come back to haunt them. Weeks passed, and while they were trying to sell my lot, I was quietly preparing to buy their office. And then, one afternoon, the phone call came. The bank officer told me the HOA was officially in default. Their office building was about to be put up for sale. If I wanted it, now was the time. I can't even describe the rush of adrenaline I felt in that moment. The people who had tried to strip me of my land were about to lose their own home base, and I had the chance to take it right out from under them. So I made the move. I submitted my offer. And just like that, the same week the HOA was still pushing to sell my lakefront lot, I was finalizing paperwork to buy their office building. The irony was almost too much to believe. When the deal closed, I drove to that office with the keys in my hand. I stood outside, looking at the sign with the HOA's name, and I couldn't help but laugh. Just months earlier, I had walked through those doors feeling powerless. Now I owned the building. Their kingdom was mine. But the story doesn't stop there. When the HOA board found out, the outrage was immediate. They called me, they emailed me, they even tried to hold an emergency meeting to figure out what to do, but it was too late. The building was mine. They couldn't take that back. Suddenly, the people who had acted so high and mighty were the ones scrambling for answers. They had no office, no place to meet, no ground to stand on. Their control over the neighborhood began to crumble. And the best part? My lakefront lot was still mine, untouched, legally secure, just as it had been from the beginning. Neighbors started coming to me, telling me their own horror stories about the HOA. The unfair fines, the bullying, the constant harassment. I realized I wasn't the only one who had suffered. The whole community had been living under their thumb for years. And now, because they got greedy, their empire had collapsed. Owning their office wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message that no one is above the law, that you can't bully people out of what's rightfully theirs, that ordinary homeowners have more power than they realize, if only they're willing to stand up and fight. Looking back, I almost feel thankful for what the HOA tried to do. If they hadn't come after me, I never would have uncovered their corruption. I never would have taken the time to understand how they operated, or how fragile their foundation really was. And I certainly never would have had the chance to turn the tables so completely. I didn't just keep my lakefront lot. I walked away owning the very office of the people who tried to steal it. And that, my friends, is what I call poetic justice. So, if you're ever dealing with an HOA or anyone really who thinks they can push you around, remember my story. Remember that knowledge is power. Remember that persistence pays off. And most of all, remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or violent. It's smart, patient, and undeniable. I'll leave you with this. Never let anyone convince you that you're powerless. You have more strength, more options, and more leverage than you realize. Sometimes, all it takes is one bold move to change everything. And if you enjoyed this story, if you felt that rush of satisfaction when I finally turned the tables, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more unbelievable true stories. Because trust me, this isn't the last time someone tried to take what's mine, and you won't believe what happened next.